Hey there everyone, and welcome to some more dragon reviews, going through some more support dragons. We're going to talk about the dragons Zhulong, Mantecore, and Aurelian. Now, I said in the previous video I was pretty down on support dragons, and they're very hit or miss. Well, all three of these are absolute hits. They're very good dragons for their own little niche cases. Well, I say niche, actually. A couple of them niche, one of them very good. Anyway, let's have a look at their claw requirements in silver. So first up we have Zhulong, which is right down at the bottom, and this is pretty standard, you know, the roughly 800 claws, 14 million silver, and 45 million fish, you know, experience. The dragons at this point, they don't take much more, so they're quite cheap to get up. Mantecore, pretty much exactly the same, and then we have Aurelian at the top, which is, again, pretty much exactly the same, 800 claws, 14 million and 45 million experience. So they're all totally fine to level up and get. Yeah, let's move on to the dragon skills themselves. First up, we have Zhulong. Apologies if you actually meant to call it Zhulong or something. I'm not sure exactly. It's some Chinese dragon, and yeah, sorry if I get that wrong. Anyway, I'm not going to summon this quite yet, because if I do, it was going to clear the map incredibly fast, and I want to talk about what this dragon does. So first of all, the first skill is a 5-second cooldown. It does an area of effect projectile. It's like this big fiery ball, it's called Great Fireball, and it deals 4 times basic attack damage. Now, this, because of the cooldown, it uses it practically every other attack. This is really good for just making the damage, making the dragon do area of effect damage consistently. And that 4 times damage, well, it's not amazing because it's not an attacker dragon, but it's reasonable and it's quite consistent with it. So that's already starting off reasonably good, but where this dragon gets really good is the second skill, which it's a 15-second cooldown. It creates 2 little minions, which are copies of Zhulong. They're like little miniature Zhulongs, and they each deal pet damage, 600% pet damage every 2 seconds, and the important thing is they last 60 seconds. So this dragon is a bit of a weird one, where it really depends massively on pet damage and pet health. If they're high, which I believe right now, these little Zhulongs are going to survive well, and you can see the damage they're doing is incredible. They're going to stay tanky, Zhulong's going to keep making more of them, and they're just going to wipe out the entire map super fast. That's basically how Zhulong works, but if the pet health is not high enough and they die off too quickly, then it's not going to do very well. They actually make Zhulong tank. You would have seen Zhulong's on the tanking list that I showed in the previous videos, and it's because these minions can tank really nicely. Zhulong is like an attacker dragon that also it survives better than attacker dragon. It creates minions to tank, and it's all pet damage as well, which, you know, is a blessing or a curse depending on things. These guys just stick around for so long. This dragon is kind of crazy the way they changed it. Skill cooldowns used to be 25 second and 50 second with the first and second skills, and this one they just reduced the cooldowns massively to 5 and 15, considering what they do. Anyway, so this dragon's pretty cool. It's really hard to really break down how good it is, because it is dependent a lot on pet stuff, but as you can see right now, it's doing exceptionally well. One other thing to note is on that second skill, the training. It increases the pet damage by a little bit. It's really hard to get numbers on pet damage. They're unreliable, but I based it on 500% being the amount Drake does, and that's what I based it on. Anyway, training them increases the damage a bit. It seems to double the health of the minions, which is why they've got really good health now. And then also the pets themselves, you can see they deal split damage. They seem to deal 1/3 of the damage as non-elemental and 2/3 of the damage as fire. No idea why, absolutely no idea why, but that's how it seems to be. So that's this dragon. As you can see, pretty cool. Good damage output, good tanking. You can kind of just leave Zhulong to do its own thing because it has so many minions to tank the damage for it. Yeah, works very well. The next dragon is Mantecore, and this is one where the skill descriptions are not very clear at all in both cases. So I'm going to talk first of all about the skill descriptions before we even look at what the dragon does. So the second skill, look at first of all, it's a 15-second cooldown, and it decreases the time between attacks to 1 second, that is of the basic attacks, and increases the damage dealt by Mantecore by 1.5 times for 10 seconds. So what this does is it actually doubles the attack rate, not only of the basic attacks, but also of that first skill. The cooldown gets reduced to 3 seconds. So yeah, it also buffs the damage of the dragon, so it's really hard to get the numbers right, and the skills descriptions are most likely wrong of this dragon. Like all the pet damage stuff that I noted down, that could be wrong. Mantecore is one of the few dragons which I'm really not sure about the numbers on it. It's very hard to tell because it does these different damage buffs and all that kind of stuff, and it's very hard to see what the numbers relate to exactly when I'm trying to note down things. So things could be very inaccurate on this dragon, but what I can say for sure is that second skill makes things double as fast. It makes everything get used double as frequently, and it gives a damage buff of some description. So the damage buff, I think, is 1.5 times, and it makes everything else deal 1.5 times damage. And then Manticore's first skill, there is an additional thing that is the most important thing about this dragon that is missed out from the normal skill description. So let's have a look at this skill. 6-second cooldown, it does damage to the enemy, 2 times basic damage. That doesn't get increased by training. Then it does a damage over time, dealing 10 hits of 0.2 times basic attack damage once per second. So that does about 2 times basic damage again. And it slows them for 10 seconds. The slowing effect, you don't really need to worry about that. Basically, this skill does a bit of damage. It's increased by the other skill, remember, so you're going to be doing actually quite reasonable damage overall. And this Manticore is going to be attacking double as quickly as well. So all of this is stacking up to make Manticore do really quite good damage to a single target. And then the really, really important bit, which is missed out, is that Manticore also marks the target, making them take 25% extra damage, or 1.25 times damage from all sources. I wrote all attacks, but more accurate is more all sources, because it's from your damage to any teammates' damage, all that kind of stuff. This is incredibly good for guild raids. If you're a wizard or a knight and you go in close range, use Manticore. Manticore's going to bite the boss, and this lasts 10 seconds. The cooldown is 6 seconds. In reality, actually, that cooldown is 3 seconds because of the second skill. It's going to keep biting the boss and keeping them marked constantly, meaning that you do 25% extra damage, or 1.25 times damage from everything. And Manticore itself does, reasonable damage. So that's what this dragon does. But in terms of all the different numbers and other stuff it's doing, it's quite difficult to really piece apart. So let's have a look at it and how it actually looks when it's fighting. So it does the buff, first of all, so it do extra damage. That's the thing. You can see the marked effect there. And as it's attacking pretty quickly. But because that cooldown is only 3 seconds on that first skill, it uses it very frequently. So it kind of doesn't look like it's attacking super fast, but it's because it keeps spamming that first skill, which puts on damage over time and does reasonable damage itself. So this doesn't actually make it onto the damage leaderboard. It's not as good as Attacker Dragons. The damage from it is not that exciting, and ultimately what a lot of its skills, its interaction, all that kind of stuff, ultimately just builds to be, it does a bit more damage. It's not that exciting in that front, and I broke it all down because it's a little complicated, but ultimately, as you can see, it does a bit of damage. That's it. The main thing is it marks an enemy and you do more damage to that enemy. So there are niche cases where Manticore is really good, like guild raids and, well, basically guild raids. It's kind of useful in some events or tournaments if there's just a single boss. It will help you kill that faster. There are other dragons which help you do that too, but Manticore's very unique in that regard. There's no other dragon which makes an enemy take extra damage from you. So yeah, that's what Manticore does. Let's move on to the next one. Actually, for some reason, I rambled about Manticore there, and I realised I completely forgot to mention it attacks in melee range, which is different to other support dragons. Don't know why I missed that. Anyway, Aurelian here. Aurelian is amazing. This is one of the most standout support dragons, and if you asked anyone what is their favourite support dragon, I bet you they would say Aurelian. Aurelian is amazing. However, there are other support dragons which do other good things. But Aurelian is great for just what you want in support. So the first skill is this aura, and that's the main thing about this dragon. So it's a 25-second cooldown, and it creates this large aura. Note, this is actually pretty large. I think it's larger than some other auras. And it lasts for 15 seconds, so about 60% of the time. And what it does is it gives you a damage buff of 30% to your damage stat. It gives a heal over time to itself. Oh yeah, also the damage buff I think is to itself too. Actually no, sorry. I don't think it goes to itself. Yes, that's right. It doesn't go to itself, but it does heal itself. So the heal is 10% per second. And so in total that's 150% heal. And then it also reduces the enemy damage by 20%. Now, I believe that's not if the enemy is stood in it, it's if you're stood in it. So you just need to be stood in it, and say these archers over here that are outside the aura, but they're attacking in, they will do reduced damage to me right here. So overall, that's a crazy buff. I'll just show you the damage buff here. I've got the 1 million damage weapon, but you can see 1.588. If I were to stand outside the aura, I've got 1.272. So 30% damage buff, really, really nice. Aurelian also, I will say, it's taking double damage and dealing double damage right now because of the shadow enemies. Yeah, so that buff, really, really good. It's healing you by 10% each second. It increases your damage by 30%. Technically not quite 30% because we've got the 20% from passive, and if you got damage put on, you know, it's not actually 1.3 times, but it's a damage buff. And also it reduces the damage you take. Altogether, that's seriously good. And on Aurelian, it doesn't give Aurelian a damage buff, but it does heal it and give it the, it makes, you know, takes less damage. So it makes Aurelian really nice and tanky. And then the second skill, this does, oh yeah, I should say the, this aura, it puts a strength symbol above Aurelian, which kind of suggests that it gets the damage buff, but it doesn't, just to confirm. Also, this aura, unlike many other buffs that get removed by knockback, or, you know, like this guy's immobilized type effect, Aurelian's buff doesn't get removed, which is very, very good. The second skill, 15-second cooldown. It does an area of effect projectile, dealing 6 times basic attack damage to, you know, in that area, which is really quite nice. 6 times is decent enough. And then also it leaves the consecrated ground, or whatever it calls it, doing damage over time up to 10 hits of 0.5 times basic attack damage once per second. So yeah, up to 10 hits of that. So that's an additional 5 times basic attack damage. So that is 11 times in total. Really quite a nice damage skill. For one damage skill on this dragon, that's very good. I should actually let you see how well it tanks. So this dragon overall, it supports you beautifully, like really, really well. Better than almost all the other support dragons. Really supports your whole party, as well as tanking itself and doing good damage. There's not much more you can ask from a dragon. Aurelian is amazing, and there's no surprise that people love this dragon. It's very, very good, and hopefully I've done it justice with saying all this. So from this, I should actually go to the damage leaderboard because... Oh no, sorry, not damage leaderboard. It is the tanking leaderboard because Aurelian makes it onto that. I don't believe... oh yes, we've got Zhulong as well, haven't we? So Zhulong is on the damage leaderboard. It's actually second place on this leaderboard. Now, it's very hard to judge because, like I was saying when looking at it, it's very much dependent on pet damage and pet health. If they are high, then Zhulong will be able to make loads and loads of those little minions, which will all tank and all do damage. If they're low, not only will they do low damage, but they'll die off too quickly that they won't last the 60 seconds, and you know they won't help Zhulong survive and all the rest of it. So it's really hard to judge, but Zhulong is definitely amazing when pet damage and pet health are high. And at that point, it's great. And otherwise, the Great Fireball is good damage. So Zhulong, regardless of it being second place here, it definitely is worthy of a spot somewhere. It does good damage output. There's no doubt about that. As for tanking, we've got Aurelian on here. Aurelian, it's mainly that heal. It does have the damage reduction too, but it's, you know, it's not crazy. It's only 20%. So it just means that its health is all right. It survives reasonably well, but the main thing is that heal over time, healing by 150% over those 15 seconds is amazing to help it tank. In this map, it was losing quite a lot of health, but bear in mind it was taking double damage, so that's why its health was dropping. Most of the time, this actually tanks really nicely. I said when going through the tank dragons that Flame Wing This is the marker of Flamewing just like doesn't really die against enemies, and Aurelian is only one below. Yes, it is a drop below. Aurelian will die, but it tanks incredibly well, surprisingly well for a support dragon. So, two very interesting dragons there, meeting the leaderboards, and then otherwise Mantecore great in the in guild raids or for taking down certain bosses, making them take extra damage from your attacks is very, very nice. Where most support dragons don't do that much damage, increasing your damage is a great thing. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.